Today's episode of the Winter Growers Podcast is brought to you by Growing for Market magazine. Which crops will pay back your investment in a hoop house or greenhouse? How does managing a greenhouse through the winter differ from summer growing? And which crops can just be overwintered in the field? Learn all that and more by subscribing to Growing for Market magazine. The writers are farmers, not journalists. They won't tell you how to grow, they'll tell you how they grow, so you can decide what works for your farm. Growing for Market is celebrating 30 years of helping local food and flower growers succeed with articles written by experienced farmers from around North America. Since 1992, Growing for Market is by farmers, for farmers. Plus, subscriptions start at only $30 per year. Whether you do farmers markets, local wholesaling, a CSA, or dream of starting a farm, check them out today at growingformarket.com. Request a free sample print or digital copy from their website, and podcast listeners can get a new subscriber discount of 25% off with the code WINTER when subscribing at growingformarket.com. I think Growing for Market magazine is an excellent and affordable resource for any grower. Today's show is also brought to you by Johnny's Selected Seeds.
Johnny's Selected Seeds is a proud sponsor of the Winter Growers Podcast. Since 1973, Johnny's has supported farmers and gardeners with superior seeds, innovative tools, and pertinent information to help feed their families and communities and ensure their growing success. Our 40-acre research farm is the heart of Johnny's, where we trial thousands of varieties and tools every year. Our research team is dedicated to finding solutions to the ever-changing challenges growers face, including disease, environmental or insect pressures, and shifting market trends. We invite you to visit the Growers Library at johnnyseeds.com to find technical resources like the Winter Growing Guide, which has tips on planting and harvesting into the shortest days of the year. You can also find variety comparison charts, extensive Jang roller trial results, and more. The employee owners at Johnny's are working hard to make 2022 a great year, and we look forward to growing with you.
Welcome to the Winter Growers Podcast. This is a special episode and a slight departure from my standard interview. Today's podcast was supposed to feature my previously recorded interview with farmer and recognized leader Jean-Martin Fortier, but for reasons I'm about to explain, I decided to make a change. A couple of weeks ago, it came out publicly on social media that J.M. Fortier had used a racial slur at his farm 2 years ago, and while it may have been addressed in person when and where it occurred, the way that he recently responded was very troubling to many of us in this space. Jesse Frost, the co-founder and host of No Till Market Garden podcast, and I put our heads together and agreed that this was a great opportunity to highlight the work of some extraordinary Black farmers and to use this episode to uplift their voices. Today, I invited two former guests of the podcast to speak, Cheyenne Sundance of Sundance Harvest and Alex Ball of Old City Acres, who are two young Black farmers doing incredible work in winter growing, sustainable farming, and racial equity in agriculture. Because we knew we'd be talking about race, and it isn't right to ask Black people who have had to bear the burden of racism to also do free labor explaining it to white people, we decided to offer them compensation for their time today. I want listeners to know this, not to make us look good, but because I didn't want to set the example that it's okay to ask for this labor for free. I also want to be crystal clear. We are not, quote unquote, canceling J.M. Fortier. We can't and we don't want to. He has a huge platform that's offered tremendous value to farmers, and that's not going away. Moving forward, I really hope he will use his leadership and influence to support efforts to address racism in food and farming and to support the continued emergence of Black leadership, as well as people of color and Indigenous farmers. Jess and I have offered him ideas about how to do that, both in private and publicly. But when I asked myself how I could do that with this podcast, I realized that a simple way would be to reallocate time to listen to these two extraordinary Black farmers, not just about farming, but about how race impacts farming, because it does. Most people who farm didn't get into farming to either perpetuate racism or to fix it. Many of us got into farming to feed people, to take care of the land, and to find a way to live a life aligned with our values. People also want to learn and discover ways of growing food in the winter, and we spend a lot of time talking about those farming methods on this podcast. But whether we talk about it or not, structural racism shapes the way we grow food, who can grow it, and who can access it. And the publicly recognized mainstream leaders in the sustainable farming world have been primarily white. The reasons for that are problematic, and sometimes, because this stuff runs so deep, it impacts how they show up as leaders. Some people would rather not talk about race and don't want to hear about it on a farming podcast. If that's you, you can tune out, but I really hope you won't, because you might need to hear this more than someone who doesn't have the impulse to tune out. Racism and land theft are the backdrop for agriculture in North America, and we can't be leaders in this space or even just farm without either playing a role in upholding it or being aligned with the effort to make it right. Even if we're not always making it the center of everything we do, on this podcast, I'd like to be aligned with that effort to make it right. Thank you for listening. Welcome to the Winter Growers Podcast. Thank you, Alex and Cheyenne, for joining me today. I invited you to come back. You're both former guests of the podcast for two reasons. One, because I think you're amazing, young, inspiring young farmers who have done incredible things in the farming world. And I always love an opportunity to talk to you about farming and what you're up to. And also a little bit about a recent situation that came about on social media with JM regarding racism in agriculture. So before we could dig into that, though, I would love for both of you to introduce yourselves, talk a little bit about your background, your farm details, and then we can dig into the other things. So who wants to go first?
Hi, everyone. My name is Cheyenne Sundance. I run a year-round urban farm that's 1.5 acres north of the city of Toronto, Ontario, here in Canada. We have 1.3 acres of field space and then 2 greenhouses, which all combined makes up that 1.5 acres. We're more of a salad-centric farm, so we grow a lot of the crops like, salad greens, obviously, tomatoes and cucumbers and peppers, herbs, mushrooms, etc. It's not just me who runs Sundance Harvest. Maya runs a lot of the operations, and she's one of the biggest, I would say, parts of Sundance Harvest right now, especially in the winter. And then we have 4 other staff members that join us in the main season. And I've been farming for, 2 and a bit years. And we do a CSA, 2 farmers markets. And next year, we're going to start a U-Pick flower farm right on site.
Well, I'm Alex Ball. I own Old City Acres. We are a 4-season CSA farm located about 35 minutes south of Detroit. We grow on about 30 acres of land, and about half of that is a mix of hoop houses, capra tunnels, things like that. We distribute mainly through our year-round flexible CSA. That's where almost all of our food goes to. We also do a farmers market as well during the main season. We just wrapped up our ninth season of farming. So we're just wrapping that up, and we had a great year. Looking forward to getting started on our 10th year.
Wonderful. Okay, well, good. Well, most of our listeners will be familiar with both of you from our earlier interviews, which were fantastic. Alex, yours just came out today, which is great. And Cheyenne, yours was part of season 1. So great episodes to go back and listen to when you have a chance, if you haven't already. But today, I guess, we've got a whole bunch of stuff would be great to talk about. Really, though, this is your floor and your opportunity to talk about what you want. But I have, a few questions, some of the things I'm curious about, be good to dig into. In particular, I guess we might as well just start with the Jean-Martin Fortier situation. I think for me, it's one of the challenges of this moment is that I want to talk both about race and racism in food system and in farming, but I also want to make sure that voices of Black farmers can be heard just talking about farming, so that it isn't always just white farmers taking up these spaces. At the same time, this feels like such a critical conversation to be having since the situation with JM just came out. So I'm curious to hear about your perspectives on this. How do you think JM could have responded in a way that would have been meaningful to both of you? And what does accountability look like to you?
Full disclosure, I often get a lot of DMs from people's employees, and I was actually the one that screenshotted what happened because I thought that it was only right. And I think that in many different industries, idolization can happen quite easily, right? You can think someone is kind of the all or nothing or the god of this one thing, because it's very easy for people to curate what you want them to see or what they want you to see. And when I get these screenshots, which I would say weekly, I get screenshots from people's employees, especially employees of color, talking about things that, have been happening on farms that aren't equitable. Some of the times I obviously don't share it, but I've even noticed like in 2020, when I was sharing so many of the screenshots I would never get the response that my white friends would get because they're seen as more apolitical to other people, and their ideas and the way they speak about things are more so seen in the less, like I would say, aggressive angle, because obviously there's that stereotype of me as a Black woman, but seen as more truthful. So I made the actual decision not to share it on my own account, but to send it to a friend who shared it, because I knew coming from me, the amounts of hate I would get would be quite stronger. And then I don't think people would see the validity of it if I was actually to post it myself. So from that point of view, just saying it like that, when I did see it, when I was sent it, I was not surprised. It's not uncommon to see, and I find that those who are the most apolitical, quote unquote, in farming are often those who see race as not an issue to be talked about, or even something that is not even to be considered in terms of how people can navigate this career. So here he said the N-word to his staff members as a funny joke. It's like, hey, my N-words. Then I can clearly see that he doesn't view that word as seriously, and probably that's within his regular vocabulary. So whenever really I hear a white person say that word, even if it's not in a quote unquote hateful way, like he mentioned, I know that it means so little to them, the history of it, how it impacts people, that by even saying it like that shows that they don't really understand or haven't done a lot of work regarding racial justice, or simply don't have any Black friends. I feel like that's also something I can throw in there. But regarding accountability, I don't believe, how do I say this, like weigh down people to feel bad, because I think everyone makes mistakes. I think this isn't a mistake that's light. I think this mistake needs to be followed up with accountability of actual resources. Having letters is nice. Having a very tearful, little video talking about how rap songs have the word, so it's totally fine. That's not nice. I think redistribution of resources has to happen. And having those scholarships of his masterclass, which I got one, is not enough in my opinion, because I was still used and taken a photo of and shared and shown that, oh, I'm diverse. They're helping out these like young BIPOC women. And I don't really want to be the scapegoat to say, hey, look, I'm not racist. We have these scholarships. But I think for any accountability process, and I've actually went through one in my personal life from me causing harm to someone, it takes this action. Simply asking the community what they want to see and then implementing the action of those asks. So in my case, when I was going through a really hard time and I wasn't really nice to someone, I listened to them and I took the action. I went to classes to deal with my emotions and to make sure it didn't happen again. I listened to them and I heard their perspectives. And then in the future, I made a point to, one, try not to do that again, but also implement the changes that they said and try to lift up that person in any way I can to help reverse some of the trauma caused. So that's really what I would say. But I'm really excited to hear what the other presenter has to say.
Thanks, Cheyenne. That was just amazing, and I really appreciate your voice. The whole situation, it's hard to talk about because Cheyenne mentioned that she didn't want to post those comments on her own personal page over the fear of attack, and I think it kind of pushes an idea in your head constantly where you have to be on guard. And you can't allow yourself to speak your truth, to even push yourself forward to the fear of retribution. And I don't even mean from the community itself exactly. I mean, even being political as a farmer outside of this situation, you feel if you speak out against things that if people have your career in your hands. I'm not saying this applies to that exactly, but I can totally understand the fear of wanting to bring light to these situations, because it feels like a large target on your back. And I think of the whole situation personally, if I got extremely hurt every time that a white person in power that I looked up to or who I thought was helpful in other ways, said something horrible or acted in a way that I thought wasn't appropriate. If I got angry every time that happened, then again, I'd just be labeled as the angry black man. So you kind of have to, it's hard to even pull attention to these issues. But when this came out, it kind of just reaffirms in your heart that a lot of people there aren't your friend. People aren't there, they don't understand your community. They're not there to really lift you up, but it more feels like, again, you're just there as a token person to be slapped on top of a billboard and to be paraded about. Kind of like, I think Cheyenne posted online a few months ago about no longer doing talks on racial equity or things like that and purely doing talks on farming. After seeing her do that, I took the same step and I kind of stopped doing talks on racial equity for the most part and mostly pushed to doing just pure farming talks. Because again, a lot of those communities, it's a situation that it's so hard to talk about and so hard to speak your mind about. But when this situation came up, it truthfully was it wasn't a surprise, but it was it was a little disheartening. And also see folks comment on, in music, these words used all the time. Well, I've listened to music and watched movies my entire life, and I'm not stabbing people and calling people slurs. You know what I mean? The minute you spend time with a white person, what things are going to hurt them and what things are going to really cut to their core. So how Cheyenne said too, if you're not really spending time with Black people, then those things wouldn't come up. So it really shows kind of the reality of the situation. Somebody who was friends with Black people, somebody who even talked to Black people, you knew their problems, even discussed anything with them, would 100% know that those things are right away inappropriate. So then it kind of draws to your mind, like, okay, well, if they don't know that's inappropriate, what else is rolling around? And that's the uneasiness that I think that hurts a lot of folks, especially when you look up to somebody. Because his book was the first book I ever bought, and it does hurt you a little bit to hear that. But after this, we're all going to heal. We're going to push through it, and I hope that one day we can always come together and shake hands and share a hug, cry a little bit, because we might need that.
Yeah. No, thank you both for those perspectives. I really appreciate that. I know, these are hard conversations to have, and I appreciate your openness and honesty. I am curious, though. I mean, do you have any thoughts about how you feel that JM can best support BIPOC farmers moving forward? I mean, do you have specific ideas and examples that, if he's listening, what do you think, would be helpful?
I think even for me, for example, for the National Farmers Union, which is a union across Canada, I started the very first BIPOC caucus because it never existed. And I spent a lot of time this year starting this caucus. So farmers all across Canada who are BIPOC can be represented and have opportunities they otherwise wouldn't. And in our meeting today, someone mentioned something about how we need to have a special workshop for white privilege and a special workshop for white people to convene within themselves and talk about how to be better. And I said that, that's like the worst thing in my opinion to do, to use your energy toward yourself and to go inward and to kind of have a little bubble. The best thing to do is one, make relationships, and then just support BIPOC farmers, especially Black farmers, because we're talking about Black farmers right now, in their future. And that could look like, supporting Black land trusts that are getting started, supporting Black cooperative farms, actively bringing on, more Black farmers onto his page, because Growers Magazine, they have an Instagram where they do videos and they go to people's farms. And I don't think I've seen one about a Black farm yet. It could be things like that. It could be collaborating, they have like a clothing line, collaborating with a local Black designer. There's many, many things, but I think a big piece I want to mention is in, the organic farming world, he is, again, idolized. So he has a lot of power. And, of course, any person saying the N-word is problematic, but someone with that much power, they have a lot of power to also make it better. They have a lot of power to change. And he has so many tools in his disposal not just social capital, but also the tools of his experience in agriculture. So he could for sure, work toward accountability and again, make those relationships with young Black farmers to support their new businesses, to help them find investors, to help them with land trusts, and of course, to amplify their voices on Growers & Co. and also his numerous works he's doing.
Yeah, and with their permission, of course, too. It seems like something that...
Of course. I think this would also come out after there's a lot of work amongst him and people around him, and this wouldn't be tomorrow. This would be in the future. Because I believe every single person is redeemable. I believe that hurt people also hurt people, and hurt people could be people that just aren't educated in terms of why you can't say the N-word, even though that sounds very silly because most people should know that. But I do believe everyone is redeemable, but that's my own personal opinion. But I do believe people should be accountable.
I just also want to be really clear, too, for the listeners that none of these conversations right now have any basis in trying to cancel JM. I mean, he has a huge platform. He's been incredibly valuable to the farming community. So I want to be clear that that is not my intention. And it doesn't sound like it's yours either. So yeah, Alex, what do you have thoughts about that?
Actually, I'm glad you brought up the idea of canceling somebody because, when I again saw the comments, people were responding with, oh, this is cancel culture at its worst, trying to bring down somebody. And when I see those comments, it just brings that, if I can share a story with you all, it's honestly kind of hard to talk about, but where my farm's at, I have 7 neighbors around me. They're the best people in the world. They're loving, they're caring, they help me out all the time. But I have one neighbor down the street who comes to my farm, regularly, and he directly harasses me. He calls me slurs. He does everything you can do. You can't call the police, but you can do everything. He can threaten you. We'll do anything they can do to make you feel uncomfortable. And a few months ago, I was in my home on my farm sleeping, and my alarm goes off like crazy. And I looked out, and there are 4 police officers at my farm store with guns drawn, ready to bust in. And I'm terrified. I'm throwing my pants on, trying to run, trying to get there and try to see what's going on. And, hand on holsters and everything. And I get there and they told me that they had reports given to them that somebody was living in my farm store and that they're there to evict me. They were there in the middle of January, in the middle of winter, with guns drawn, with the idea to come there to evict me from my own farm property. Even though I was not living in a store, I was living in my home, but the store I left the light on because I just forgot the light on. And luckily, my father was a police officer there for 30 years. And once I told them who I was, they're like, oh, we love that guy. We know that guy. He's, oh, you're his son? That's okay. But you think, I've been in one hometown my entire life. I'm a 4th generation in my hometown. My father was a cop in the town itself. And the police in that moment were still able to be weaponized to cause fear and to try and really cancel somebody. That's real canceling, is making someone afraid in their own home, on their own farm. So I remember for weeks and weeks, I would sleep and I would always have one eye would pop over to the door of my house. So I was terrified that the police were going to raid my home, not because of an ugly, burned out car in the front yard or lawn grass or because I'm dealing crack, but because a neighbor down the street who openly multiple times has told me, I do not like Black people to your face, was able to then weaponize that against me. So when I hear people talk about cancel culture, it made me kind of laugh because I'm in my hometown. I'm where I should be safe. I'm 4th generation here, but still, you're still a target. You can still be quote unquote canceled, but really canceled, not having your feelings hurt. It's being at home terrified. That's really the reality of cancel culture, especially, I live in a diverse, place I feel safe, but that's still a weaponized thing that happens to Black farmers and farmers of all types. Farmers deal with, with pesky neighbors, but then you add on race on top of that. It just adds another level to it.
Yeah. I'll jump in really quick. I have something I think is thoughtful to say about the idea of cancel culture. People are doing this to themselves. It's not like we're, making up what they're saying. We have direct receipts of literally employees, like in this instance. They made their whole. They said what they said. And to think that people are just supposed to ignore it is to openly say that it shouldn't matter if someone is acting racist or saying some racist thing. So it's not like we're fabricating a story. He's openly admitted to saying the N-word. Multiple employees have openly admitted to hearing him. So if anyone is doing the canceling, him himself, by even saying it and reacting the initial way he did, is doing it. People are just listening and saying, hey, that's not okay, which I think is totally fine to do. And like you said, Clara, he has such a big following. I highly doubt this will actually impact him in any financial way, really at all, because from just seeing the comments, you can clearly see the kind of political viewpoints and also the humanitarian, because this is like a humanitarian issue to value Black life. The way they view Black life, you can see that easily in his comments. So I think his fans will be quite happy to keep following him and not feel like he personally needs to do accountability. But I can say for myself, for my tens of followers I have that talk to me about this, we're all watching and we really would like to see better.
Thank you for that. Yeah. And thank you, Alex, for your the hard story you shared too. I think that's important to hear those firsthand experiences. So thank you. And I'm sorry about that.
After this, in the next few months, this is going to, as it should, it'll, on some level, it'll fade from memory. In 5 years from now, we'll hopefully be healed. We won't even think about it. But in 5 years, I'm still gonna have these problems. I'm still gonna have a neighbor who's gonna come down there, call me slurs, and call the police on me. That's gonna continue until either one of us moves. And that's the reality of it. That's the reality of the situation, and kind of the weight of the situation. In the moment, I understand tensions are high, emotions are flaring, but this will calm down. But the reality of being a Black farmer, the reality of owning land, anywhere, the reality of owning land is that you're going to be having to deal with situations till you die.
Yeah, and I think it's also important, for Jam to see a lot of those comments that came about after he acknowledged what happened were incredibly racist and misogynistic. And, does he want to have fans of his sharing those viewpoints, on his platform? I mean, those are the sort of things that he needs to correct and to make a safe space on his platform for Black farmers and BIPOC. So that just seems like the right thing to do, obviously. I don't know. I mean, there's plenty more that we could dig into here, but obviously we only have a short time. So I'd really like to hear, Cheyenne, I mean, this is, from you and from you, Alex, sort of like some actions that you've been taking specifically to try to change things. I'm interested in hearing more about your Growing in the Margins program and anything else that you've been doing to affect change within your world and under your control. I think those are really important stories to share. So
for me, when I started Sundance Harvest, I had no formal training. Here in Ontario, there's I only know one Black for-profit farm, which is saying a lot because we have a really high population here around Toronto and the GTA. So really, right when I started Sundance Harvest, I decided to start a program called Growing in the Margins, which now is a nonprofit. That's a 12-week program that often happens, in spring, summer, and fall for BIPOC youth to actually gain the technical skills they need to start a farm. And it's been going really good. We don't do it in the winter because no one likes the winter here, but which is very true. But we have lots of cool alumni, like Aaliyah Frazier from Lucky Bug Farm. She's an amazing example because she's done numerous articles and interviews about her CSA program in Guelph, a nearby town. And then really, I think the future of, equity in agriculture, again, doesn't look like talking heads and nonprofit talking heads talking about their oppression. It looks like just giving Black farmers the tools they need to have success. And the tools often look like capital, it looks like jobs, and it looks like land. So a good example of the way that I'm enacting change is having sustainable, profitable farm. And I think that's the easiest way that right now I can do that. I can hire, 5 staff members, pay them well above minimum wage, and make sure that they have autonomy and they feel supported in this farm that I'm running. And then I would say the last kind of way I'm affecting change is my local farmers union across Canada pushed this amendment forward, and it got passed to create the very first BIPOC caucus in Canada. And the other two caucuses this union had was the women and youth, and both were made in the 60s. So you can really see that no one has advocated, I guess, for a caucus, but having this caucus means that there's funding to actually support BIPOC farmers in their training, in their learning, and in their land linking. So really the ideas I'm pushing forward as the now president is to have BIPOC field days all across Canada and many different BIPOC farms. So communities of color can convene on a beautiful day, eat, have fun, learn about chickens, learn about bees, learn about vegetables, and get these technical skills from their own community, and also be able to support each other in any way they can. So I think the future looks like sharing resources, whether that be through a BIPOC field day, learning on people's farms, working at Sundance Harvest. We pay $20 an hour to start after probation here, which is pretty big because in Toronto it's $14.25 for minimum wage. And then of course you're growing in the margins, just giving that free education in an environment that's one, transit accessible for many of the youth that don't drive here in the city, and two, that's supported and mentored by me. So those are the three things that I'm doing.
It's funny because after following Cheyenne online, I was really inspired to get an employee, to expand and to an employee. But kind of echoing what she said, first off, just being a profitable business that hires people. We pay $15 an hour starting wage. For our employees. I have 8 employees, but for folks who work with us. So then first thing is being a long-lasting part of our community. Again, this is our 10th season, and just having the longevity of being an institution that's consistent in the community, that's probably a huge part of it. But one thing I'm really proud of recently, I was part of a group called the Washtenaw County Black Farmers Fund. And Washtenaw County is a county where my farm is at. But we just recently raised $100,000 to go directly to farmers in our county for land access, operating capital, infrastructure, things like that, to try and really just increase access, but mainly the increase access for Black folks who don't have aren't able to tap into traditional lending, or folks who just really don't have enough equity to sometimes even leverage to get more, to get tools they need. So we're really hoping to build up and start a local community of growers, of Black growers. It's funny, in my community, there are only really 2 of us. And the other guy he's actually one of my uncles who I found out who married into the family later. So there are only a few of us in our area. And the main reason is access to land. We have tons of young growers in the urban areas who are much smaller scales, who are wanting to scale up, wanting more than that step. But that always means, for the most part, leaving the city, going south, a few miles, and getting farmland down there. But the cost of land, especially after COVID, has skyrocketed, especially in our area, Southeast Michigan. We're really bouncing back from really, really bad from 2008. So land prices here have been skyrocketing like crazy. So we're hoping that through this land fund, we'll be able to establish, even if we can get 2 or 3 people established and starting out strong, that'll increase the amount of Black farmers in our area by 200%. Yeah. So we're hoping that, that's kind of my main project I've been working on.
Yeah, thank you. Both of you are really inspiring with what you're working on. So thank you for sharing those details. Hey, podcast listeners, we're going to pause for a moment to hear from one of our show sponsors. Today's show is also brought to you by Tunnel Vision Hoops. Tunnel Vision Hoops designs and manufactures do-it-yourself high tunnels, hoop houses, and greenhouses. With an extensive array of products to help large and small growers become more productive, they have 11 different tunnel widths to fit any application and designs to stand up to weather conditions from coast to coast. Tunnel Vision is also a national distributor of parts and accessories needed to build, maintain, or upgrade an existing tunnel or hoop house. Check out their Tunnel Vision Hoops YouTube channel for instructional how-to videos to help build a great high tunnel or hoop house. Here at Four Season Farm, we have 2 movable high tunnels made by Tunnel Vision Hoops, and they are definitely my favorites. To learn more, visit their website at tunnelvisionhoops.com. Now, back to the show. But I am actually now curious, like, who inspires you in the farming movement? Are there specific Black farmers that you follow that we should know about?
Honestly, I don't. There's not a lot of farmers that are Black doing for profit in the scale that I'm doing right now that I can look up to. But I would say many of the farmers that are actually my friends. So I would say my friends here locally. And then I would actually say the people who work at Sundance Harvest, even though that sounds super corny, but I have changed so much my business structure because my staff tells me what needs to be better or what should be better, because, you know, I have an ego about myself because it's almost impossible not to with anyone. And I really do value hiring staff that are radical Black women who can check me. And I get checked, you know, almost every day. And I feel like they inspire me. And I think more often than not, people should look to youth, especially because youth have these fresh ideas and they will literally inherit the earth. So I don't have, you know, anyone big and fancy, but I do have the people who are like locally in my community and locally who are working as my staff.
Yeah, I have a few of the local farmers in the area who I taught to and bounce ideas off. But like Cheyenne said, there aren't a lot of Black farmers. And I remember when I found Cheyenne's account on Instagram, I was so excited. I was so happy to find another young Black farmer. And I have another friend who's in Georgia as well, who I follow. It was like 3 or 4 people who actually follow, who I would say may not look up to, but always look to them for their ideas and look to them for, you know, for their voice.
Okay, well, I want to shift gears a little bit into the specific winter growing and the, you know, farming work that you're doing. Sort of like a check-in to see how your current season is going now, what you've got growing in your greenhouses and high tunnels. You know, it's December as we're recording this, beginning of December, just to, you know, see where your farms are at and what your future goals are.
Yeah, we're doing pretty solid right now. We have a tunnel full of spinach, we have a tunnel full of mixed cut greens of arugula, Russian kale, lettuce mix that are all staggered, you know, 3 or 4 weeks off to push us through the season. Today, we did our very last planting of 2021. Today is our final overwinter head lettuce crop. So that went in the ground. Right here in Michigan right now, it's super wet. We've been getting tons and tons of water here lately. So we're really just trying to keep things dry as possible. But really, we're all prepped, ready to go for winter. I'm pretty excited for this year. It's been a long season. I'm ready for things to cool down and slow down a little bit. But no, we're pretty prepped, ready to go.
Literally cool down.
Yeah. I'm excited. And the nice thing is too is that in our system, we really try to carve off those mountains into the valley. So this time of year, we're only doing our year-round CSA, and that's you pick CSA, and because it's all year round, you know, we don't get really heavy, crazy seasons. You know, it's busy in the summer, but it's pretty consistent flow. So right now we're not, you know, driving around, dropping off tons of restaurants, nothing too crazy. We're kind of slowing down, just doing our CSA and trying to balance out, you know, that life-work balance a little bit while still providing, you know, food for our customers.
So future plans for Sundance Harvests and what we have going on right now. So right now we are doing our winter greens. We have a ton of Salanova in one of our greenhouses. And we grow butter Salanova, which is really beautiful in the winter. And then in the second greenhouse, we have kale, winter boar. We have rainbow chard. We have some garlic greens because I took the seed of garlic and I threw it in a side bed. And we have lots of garlic greens. We have lemongrass and a bunch of herbs. And we, of course, have mushrooms. So future plans, I was thinking of actually not doing winter growing next year, but that might be sacrilege to a lot of people that follow me because I've posted so much about winter growing. But I think what I'm going to do next year is to kind of do less winter growing and maybe not do a CSA, but just do a farmer's market every other week. But I'm really excited next year about our flower farm. This is something that I have always wanted to do. And we're speaking of winter growing, we're literally growing the seedlings for many of the flowers in January. And flowers are a whole different ballgame because they often have to be started so early, especially for perennials. So I'm really excited to have a quarter-acre flower farm that's a U-pick. And just to kind of do that agritourism piece, because we're literally in a city. So I think that would be really beneficial to us. But regarding future plans, just training a bunch of staff this winter and just going through those processes. But that's really what's going on.
That's great. And Cheyenne, I'm really, you've been so transparent, especially on social media, about sharing your farming journey. And in particular, the things that you try and the things that you decide to drop. And I'm really curious, like, how do you choose what to try and how do you choose when to drop it and then try something else?
So I look at two things. One is profit and the second is labor. So winter greens are taking a lot of labor because aphids don't care about my biological pest management as much as I thought they would. And this year I tried to buy half of the amount of like green lacewings and I shouldn't have. And I'm just realizing the cost of having to purchase so much biological insects like predators isn't really worth the amount of harvest we get, because we really don't get a lot. We get, for the Salanova harvest, half of what we get in the summer. And when I'm thinking about my staff, generally do not like working in the winter because the daylight hours are so short and the sunset here in Toronto is at 4:30. I'm just realizing that my labor doesn't want to do it, and it takes more labor intensive to wash the greens and take care of the greens and apply the biological pest management techniques. And then of course the profit is much lower. So I think that's really what I look at. And for something with flower farming, that's going to be the ideal thing I'm thinking about next year, because we're going to put landscape fabric. It's going to be U-pick, self-serve really. And I only have to appoint one staff person to 2 shifts a week to take care of it. So I think that will be kind of a home run. I'm probably the most excited about that I've been in a while, but I write everything down. And I think the best thing with farming is to see every year as an experiment, because you're probably going to try something every single year that you didn't try the following year, and you'll be able to grow better from that.
Yeah, that's great. Alex, do you have any current innovations and discoveries you'd like to share? One sort of side note is I noticed you had posted about, many winter growers struggle with voles and rodents in the winter. And typically voles need some sort of box to run into with a snap trap or something to catch them. And I noticed you used a recycled old contractor trash bag box as your container. And I thought that was brilliant. So anyway, those little things I think are so great to see and to share.
Yeah. I got that idea from your dad's book, and I was like, man, I need a cigar box or something, but all I had was a trash bag box. This year we've been really working hard to control our aphid pressure. I think you and I talked about aphid pressure on my last podcast we did last, and just horrendous aphids on our farm. And because of that, we've really been decreasing our amount of fertilizer we put down to the point now where after like last July, I stopped putting down any extra nitrogen fertilizer and just went to pure compost for the last 6 months, nothing but pure compost. And that has, for the most part, helped decrease the aphids a little bit. Today I saw a few on our bok choy, but nothing that couldn't be controlled with some light spray and like that. So yeah, been really decreasing our amount of fertilizer, which is something that is kind of hard because our soil is just so poor. All of our land is a mix between high hills and low bottoms. So the high hills are dry, but the fertility is horrible and the soil isn't great. The bottoms are very fertile, but pure wet. So it's been kind of an experiment trying to get our soil just right. So that's been our real innovation this year. It's just been trying to experiment and understand our soil. I feel like with anything, but with farming, anytime I answer one question or I look towards one thing, it's always 3 more questions. You become deeper and deeper and deeper. And I'm so deep in the soil now that I don't know if I even know how to build greenhouses anymore. Like I don't know how to do that. all my mind's going to that kind of stuff. But no, that's kind of the big thing, has been trying to grow our soil, to try to be an artist of soil has been my big innovation in 2021. But for me, usually I'm build greenhouses or put driveways, digging ditches. It's things you can look and see right away. We're trying to do more minute things right now.
That's great. Cheyenne, I'd love to hear a little bit briefly about your virtual 5-week farming series that you just were sharing about online. What are the topics you cover? Who's your ideal audience?
Yeah, so the virtual 5-week farming series really came about because a lot of the people who follow me on Instagram have missed my really kind of cute and kitsch old IGTV videos where I'd be like, this is how you grow great lettuce, or this is how you grow amazing tomatoes. And they mentioned how they really love those videos, but wanted something a bit more in depth. So the 5-week virtual farming series for winter will really cover, I would say, the key topics in terms of having a really great harvest, especially for the winter time. So some of the topics will be seedlings 101. So learning how to grow really great seedlings. We grow tens of thousands of seedlings at my farm, so we really have that dialed in. Soil health. We feed the soil because the soil actually feeds the plants. So we'll discuss how we operate our no-till field and also no-till greenhouse planter beds and what we do to ensure that there's always a high nutrient bank existing. Biological pest control. Despite me saying I have a bit of aphids, our actual technique for managing them in the greenhouses and on the field are really smart, as long as I'm not shorting myself half an order of green lacewings. And we'll be speaking about biological pest control because we actually don't spray anything at the farm and we grow a bountiful amount of produce. And the last two is crop planting. And then, of course, season extension. It won't just be because of greenhouses. I know not everyone has like a fancy schmancy greenhouse. So we're going to be covering low tunnels, caterpillar tunnels, row covers, really everything. And also not even covering crops. Some alternatives you can do in terms of varieties and also different ways to grow a crop to ensure that you have the longest harvest possible. So that's just 5 of the workshops in this series. I would say this is best for a home grower or someone who's new to farming or even a homesteader, because this will really help you get set up to grow a lot of bountiful vegetables.
That's great. Great. And you've got all those details on your website and on social media for if anyone wants to find that, right?
Yes, completely. Everything's on there.
Great. Great. Thank you. So both of you probably remember for our first interview, we kind of wrapped up the conversation with a lightning round, if you remember that. I kind of have, since you've already done that once, I sort of came up with a slightly different lightning round, just a few questions to ask. So first question is, both of you are former Real Farmer Care recipients, which is about self-care. And I'm curious, how do you take care of your body, heart, and mind as a farmer?
So I make sure I eat a diet. I wouldn't say diet. I eat meals that make me feel nourished. And that could be I eat hot wings one day, or I eat, a big, healthy butternut squash soup. But I eat food that makes me feel good in my body, mind, and soul. I also make sure I take my vitamins. Sometimes it's hard for me to get enough iron, enough B12, or even enough D3 because it's super wintry here. So I try to take things that I'm missing, and that keeps my mind really sharp and able to stay in the farming game. And I guess my soul, I go out dancing every week, multiple times a week with my friends. We don't really go to clubs. We go to parties or, art events, and we just dance. And I actually went to a live funk show last night and I had a great time. And I love doing that because, I go to the farm the next day, I feel energized and I feel really excited about life.
That's great. Alex?
Yeah, no, I just started setting healthy boundaries for my work schedule and saying I'm just going to work Monday through, Friday 9 to 5, Saturday morning markets, setting hard boundaries for myself, what I'm willing to do and what I was not willing to do anymore. Like I said, this is my 10th year. And then first, 7-8 years, you're working sun up, sundown every day for months on end, not going to family reunions, not seeing your loved ones. So the last few years, I'm working really hard to just set aside certain days. Like every Tuesday, I watch Survivor with my friends. It's every Thursday, just my family, and we just go hang out with my nieces. It's really small things, just making time to schedule those things in, because the farm will just eat up every single moment of your time if you don't let it. So that's been for my soul, just allowing myself to spend time with my friends and family. It's just been so helpful. And that kind of goes along with just getting off the farm, spending time away from looking at the rows and greenhouses. That's been the biggest changes in my life that really allowed me to feel so the level of self-love in my farming game.
That's great. Yeah. So I guess, can either of you really turn off farming in your brain, or do you think that you really can separate it? Or is it something that's always sort of, it's been integrated within you?
I think I can never separate myself from farming and also like my business. But in a way, I chose to do farming for the rest of my life because I felt like it is so natural to grow food. It's so natural to feel the soil and have your vibrations impact the world around you. So I don't think I can ever get it out of my head, but I think that's kind of what I want because I'm already knee deep in this compost.
No, I'm sort of addicted to farming. I can't get out of my head. It's so many questions and so many amazing answers, and the community around it is so amazing that whenever I try to whenever I try to be like, oh, I'm off season grouchy farmer, like I'm not talking about the farm season anymore. The first moment someone says, so what are you doing this winter? What's in your greenhouses? I just get smiley and I want to share with them all the love of farming. So no, it's part of who I am, and I don't think it's ever gonna. I think even if I moved to the North Pole by myself, I would have a little raised bed garden. I'd try to sell to somebody.
Well, this question might be hard to answer then. The next one is, what would you be doing if you weren't farming?
Man, I already know that. I'd probably run a movie theater. That's like my dream goal. My dream job is like take the winter off of farming to work at a movie theater. I don't know why. I love the environment.
What about you, Cheyenne?
I think what I would do is work in theater. I actually like puppet theater a lot for some reason. I throw these house parties where we do improv puppet theater and people make their own puppets. So I think I would work in theater or maybe do acting.
What is one thing people don't know or assume about you?
I think because of the persona that Sundance Harvest has had, and not because I created it, it literally just kind of happened. People assume that because I'm really headstrong, which I am, I'm an Aries, that I'm super, super confident in everything I'm doing and I have all the answers. And I will say I have almost no answers. Most of my career has been because of failures and because I learned from those failures and I shift. But I would say like my success rate is 50-50. And really what you see on Instagram is what works. And I don't really share what doesn't work. Like my very first year of farming, when my entire crop was wiped out by aphids, because I didn't understand that you had to vent a greenhouse.
Oops. What about you, Alex?
Well, I think that, I don't know, a lot of times people don't think that, I don't know, I'm upset or I'm having hard times in my career or I'm exhausted. I have a very kind of bubbly, positive just attitude all the time, but I have the same attitude when I'm depressed and tired, was swamped out. I look act almost exactly the same. So a lot of people are like, oh man, he's doing great. But a lot of times you don't think, no, I'm exhausted like this year, I was done with the farming season by about June. And it wasn't even farming related. It was, personal life outside of work related. But I was like, okay, I'm about done. But, but constantly putting that face on that you're happy, you're ready to go. But we all know the reality. The behind closed doors, you're just like in a big chair, just burned out, trying to figure out what you're gonna do next. Kind of like Cheyenne said, you're only posting the stuff that goes well. I remember one year I spent like $400 digging a hole and burying it again. Like nothing happened. I spent money, dug a hole, and buried it, but we didn't post that online. I don't want to embarrass myself like that. But yeah,
it's all learning, right?
It's all learning, yeah.
Okay, well, the last question here might be a hard one, or it might not. If you could change one thing about the world, what would it be?
I'm not going first.
Yeah. There's one thing about the world.
Yep.
Man, I think this is a baseline. I wish people had opportunities, had access. That's the main thing. I think most people want to do amazing things and can do amazing things, are just lacking that access. And I think if change one, people have opportunity.
Yeah. Anything come to you, Cheyenne?
So I think that every single person has the resource that they need, and that doesn't cancel out each other. So I was going to say to, down with colonialism, because I think that's actually what I believe the most. Because when we're thinking about in terms of climate crisis and extracting and mining and the land back movements, I think that's the biggest thing. But I also think that just saying resources is a really big part of that process, and also part of the process of reparations. So I would say everyone has the resources that they need to be, because this is a question about one thing and I can't say both of those things. So I'm going to say that.
Well, that was the last question. And I really appreciate both of your time today. Really, really appreciate this. This is an important conversation. So good to also tune in with you about what you're up to right now. And and just share more about the incredible work that you're doing. So thank you so very much for being here. I hope to come visit both of your farms one day very soon. Today's show was produced by me, Clara Coleman, with support from No Till Growers. Special thank you to Willie Breeding for the theme music. Thank you to the patrons at patreon.com/no-till-growers for helping to make this show possible. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week.